welcome. This is Sound of the City. My name is Alexis, and today I'm bringing you the voice of the people. We are in San Diego, California, and today we will be addressing systematic racism, the current social issues, protesting, defunding the police, and creating the change we wish to see. So today I actually brought you some of the community leaders that I've either encountered out in the streets, work, somehow have had an impact in the last couple weeks of me being out. And I think it is important to hear from people who are actually out in the streets and experiencing what's going on. So we will introduce each other, give you a little bit of our background so you get to know us a little bit. First, to my left, I have Kisi. Thank you for being here. To her left, Dominique. Thank you for being here. Sorry, I fucked that up. Dominic. Yeah, Dominic. All right, that's my bad. Myra, thank you for being here as well. And one of my guys that I've been working with, and if you know me, you've seen him around maybe some of my shows, Trey. Thank you for being here as well. So we'll be covering a couple topics, but first we'll go ahead and get the introductions out of the way so you could get to know us a little bit better. So I'll kick it off. My name is Alexis. You guys have either met me, you guys I met through Nike, I met through work, and you guys I've met through activism. I'm 25 years old. Both of my parents are Mexican. Let me see. I'm from Chula Vista, California. I grew up here, and my experience in San Diego has been very, diverse. I've had experience with people of all races. I've experienced racism, for sure, in my own community and outside of it. And I feel very passionate about what's going on now, and I'm excited to start creating some of this change.
My name is I'm Trey. I'm from San Diego, California, born and raised. I'm 24 years old. I'm turning 25 in December. I don't know I said that, but yeah, I've been in San Diego all my life, so I've definitely dealt with a lot of racism growing up, and my whole view on the American system is it's to a particular group. It's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about, but that's what we're talking about now. We're here to discuss the corruption and the injustice in our society. So I'm just looking forward to doing that with my peers here.
Hey, I'm Myra. I'm 22 years old. I'm from San Diego, California. Um, I am pursuing law, and during my undergrad, I was a poli-sci major. I learned a lot about systemic racism, and I'm so excited to talk about it and talk about what I've learned. I'm a Chula Vista native, as well as my parents are from Mexican descent. So systemic racism is something that I'm passionate about in all areas of the political arena.
Hi, my name is Dominic. I am from San Diego, California. I am 23 years old. Definitely, I experienced racism not only within like the white community, but also within the Mexican community. I am half Mexican, so I've definitely had my fair share of experiences with that. And I'm hopefully looking forward to bringing light to that, as well as maybe opening up some eyes to the discrimination that I faced within the community.
Hi, my name is Kisi. I'm 18. I just graduated high school. And I am mixed race. I have a white mother and an African father. I kind of got thrown into some of the activism that has been happening over the past few weeks. It's been an amazing experience. I've been able to feel really connected to the Black community in a way that I haven't felt before, living in a predominantly white neighborhood. So it's been an amazing experience. I'm excited to talk about my experience living in a predominantly white neighborhood, as well as my hopes for the change of the future as well.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for being here. I feel this conversation is very important because we're out there. And I feel like, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like the media doesn't necessarily cover our experiences fully. So that's what I wish to do today. So let's dive right into it. So first question I want to ask you guys is what are some examples of systematic racism or systematic oppression that you have experienced, learned about, or witnessed?
I have them. Yeah. Okay. um, so I think growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood, I had to tolerate a lot of microaggressions. I think that was kind of the biggest thing for me was just um, just super casual racism. I think is what was weirdest to me growing up. It wasn't even weird. It was kind of just realizing that the community that I was in was like that. Um, and it definitely shaped the way that I saw myself and the way that I saw Black people in general. And it's taken years for me to unpack kind of the way that that has affected my self-esteem and yeah, the way that I see race. It's been hard, and I think it's been unusual for me just because I haven't really had any outlet to talk about these things because I have been surrounded by a lot of white people most of my life. Like not only within like the schools, but also within my own family. Um, so yeah, it's been something that's been good to open up about and talk about with everyone. But it's just something that's been almost so normalized that it's weird to talk about now just because like I was saying, the microaggressions, that it was like an everyday occurrence from not only peers, so people my age, but parents and teachers as well, which is disconcerting. But yeah, so I've definitely experienced a lot of those kind of microaggressions firsthand.
Sorry, super quick. I have a question for you. So, as you were growing up in this like community that was predominantly white, or at least white influence, at what point did you like acknowledge that like all this shit was going on around you that was wrong? Because at some point, I mean, if that's what you grew up in, I imagine you put up with it, right? That's all you know. But at some point, like you become your own person. I mean, in your brain, to where you start to acknowledge and process this information. At what point were you like, okay, this is not how this is supposed to be, and like this place where I'm at is wrong?
Well, honestly, I would say the first time that I realized that something was up was when I was 5, and we were on the playground, and a group of kids were talking about like a burglary or something that had happened in the community, and everybody said, "Oh, we think it was a Black person who did it," and then they all just turned to me, and then I realized really fast that I was the only representation of my race for all the kids that I knew. So I very quickly realized that I had to be perfect at everything because they were going to associate me with the whole Black race because that was all that they knew. So to be honest, I would say that I'm not, or I'm just now, because of the protests, getting to a point where I feel comfortable speaking out in situations where I feel like something is wrong. I was at a party last summer where the host got super drunk and was saying the N-word with the hard ER, and I was the only Black person there, and everyone just stared at me. Nobody said anything, they just stared at me. So I think that was really weird. Everyone there was old enough to know that what was happening was wrong and that something needed to be said, and nothing was said. And I think that kind of is like a good representation of my whole experience with racism my whole life, is that it's just these moments where everyone kind of knows it's wrong, but we all just kind of still accept it.
What can you expect from people? Not what can you expect, like, but obviously the right thing would be in that situation to be like, don't say that shit. I've seen videos where like you see videos where people like get beat up over it, and honestly, it's like some people have sympathy for the people who get beat up, but personally, I don't. That shit is outdated. We are living in a society that is super outdated. You know what I mean? We're not. People of color are not equally treated to those who are, non-people of color, and I think that's pretty obvious. And in my experience, we've had a lot of, at least so. For example, I'll give you an example. My barber, he's white, and while all this was going on, he's also my best friend for like the last year, so he's the person I would talk to the most about everything. So he knew what was going on in my life. He seen how passionate I was, but he wasn't able to relate to all the problems that were going on. So he's like, "Why are you out there like that? Like, getting shot at, getting tear gassed." Like I told him, like at one point, like while you're out here, like the sentiment is like, you're ready to die for this shit. So he couldn't relate. And he just was like, so as I started to get more riled up about it, I would hold him accountable a little bit more every time, until the point where he was just like, why are you attacking me? I am not wrong. You know what I mean? And it's like, what do you, like, it's a tough conversation to have. So, you know.
I think what you just mentioned, it's all about just holding people accountable for their actions. I think that's something that we're honestly just really good at not doing as a society. You know what I mean? Nobody ever wants to take blame for anything. You know, nobody ever wants to own up to their actions. It's so easy to project blame on other people. And I think it's normalized to project blame on other people. You know, we never want to acknowledge that there has to be an internal change. You know, like you never want to be the bad guy. You never want to be the person that is in the wrong. And I think that's weird. And I think it's even just switching the narrative of what accountability is. You know, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be about like educating people. I think too, especially. I mean, like, because a lot of my racist experiences have been with young people. I try not to hold it against them just because I feel like there's so much room for change in a young person's mind. And I know that it's something that they were taught and not something that is innate. So I always, maybe too much, am pretty much just hoping.
That's very mature of you, though, you know, to give him that, like, you know, opportunity to change, just that benefit of the doubt that maybe it's not really how you feel, it's just what you know right now. You know?
Yeah.
You want to speak? All right, Trey. So the question is, what are some examples of systematic racism, systematic oppression that you've experienced, learned about, or witnessed?
I mean, all my life, but I would say the first time I really felt racism was, honestly, I would say in third grade. I just had a specific teacher. I'll never forget her, Miss Trussell. She was just on me for everything. You know what I mean? Kids would do the same thing I did, but with me, it was just like.
And you think it was like race related?
It was just a little too, and I was the only black kid in the class. You know what I mean? It even came down to the point that on one of the last days of school, you know, you're letting the kids go play. You know, it's not really any class. You know what I mean? All day you playing. You know what I mean? She was upset with me for something, like me playing with like a toy or something not that crazy, but that whole day she didn't let me do anything, and I never forgot that. She just had me sit next to her the whole day while kids was playing. I'm just like, really? Like, when are you gonna let me? She never let me go, and it was just stuff like that. I was just like, what's going on? And then I started seeing my friends start saying racist things to me, slurs, you know, just like what you were saying about associating any other person that of color that does a crime or any bad narrative that's associated with me just because of my skin color. So it's just like having to deal with that and face people, and just while also trying to just have my own identity and figure out my life and, you know, what I want to do in my life. But I also got all these different factors affecting how I think. You know what I mean? It just made it made me a numb to a lot. I had to like really like, you know, disconnect, because if I was to stay in that mind state, I'd be in jail. I'd be angry all the time. I'd be lashing out at people. So I had to learn to control that. But it's just not fair that people of color have to do that.
Right.
While, you know, a white person can go and act wild as fuck, do whatever the fuck they want to do, and it's just, oh, it's fun, oh, you know, they're just having a good time. If I do the same shit, it's ghetto. So what's he doing? Oh, you know what I mean? Oh, what's he? You know what I mean? It shouldn't be this way, but it's something that's been passed down from generation to generation. It's nothing new. We've been talking about, you know what I mean? This is something that needs to be changed and broken. It's an outdated system, like you said, that we've talked about. So I mean, it's just something that needs to happen. It's about time.
So question for you. So you mentioned it too. Like, there's narratives out there that like it's generalizations that, like, for example, like the example you used, like something bad happened and it's like a black person must have done it. Like me growing up, I faced some situations that were somewhat similar. I lived in a like predominantly Hispanic community, but even then, like in the Hispanic community, there's like racism. So because I was darker, you know what I mean? You get treated a little different. But so there's this narrative. Do you like believe, you know what I mean, some of the things that are said, like, damn, maybe black people are like this because you grew up in this system? Or did you always know, like, nah, they're wrong and like we are, you know what I mean? And like they're wrong? Because I feel like that's difficult, because if you grow up in a system that tells you that that's what the reality is, maybe you also believe it. So that's my question to you, like, you know, like, what's the thinking behind that? Like, did you always question it?
I've always been a questioner. Like I'm always like thinking outside the box, like conspiracy guy. Like I've always been that way, just open minded. So I never really held anybody. I didn't like we were talking about giving people the benefit of the doubt. I did that a lot, just because especially if I didn't really know you, like why am I gonna get all worked up over anything that you do? You know what I mean? So just when I heard things like that about like just how black people are, and the stereotypes, just with any race in general, I never really like thought like, okay, they're all like that. Like I'm gonna go see and they're gonna be just like that. You know what I mean? I never thought in my head like that's true. I was just like, that's what you're saying, but I still have to find out for myself. But that's just how I always thought about it. But I know plenty of people. I have plenty of friends and even family that are stuck in a certain mindset because of that. You know what I mean? Like I have certain family who they don't fuck with their black side of the family just because they feel like it's all negative, it's all bad. Just the whole narrative of just the black culture. You know what I mean? I even have some family who are Dominican who they do not want to be called black. You know what I mean? Like it's because it's associated with the culture that's been negative forever. You know what I mean? So I mean, it depends on the person. I don't think that people should think that way. I don't think you should be that close minded to just generalize a whole race or culture of anyone over what people say. But I mean, when you're taught that and you have the media and the whole white culture, you know, supporting it, then I mean, you can't help people get stuck in it and you know what I mean, fall into
to
it.
the
You
system.
can't help
Yeah.
you can't help it. But I mean, that's why we're talking about this. It's just set up wrong. It's set up to make people fall into that false narrative or just false truth of how the world is. You know what I mean? And I don't know. Yeah, that's my opinion on that. Yeah.
Hey, you guys have anything to add to that question?
Okay, so what was the
So the
question?
question was, what are some examples of systematic racism, systematic oppression that you've experienced, learned about, or witnessed?
Okay, where do I start? um, so usually when we hear about systematic racism or oppression, we think of white versus black, and that's definitely like a very global aspect of racism. However, growing up in San Diego, I grew up in a very predominantly Latinx community. So I have that perspective of racism. Being Afro Latinx myself, there's a big identity issue there that I grew up with. And a lot of it stems from, even though it was Latinx people perpetuating it on me, it does stem from white supremacy in itself. The idea that you want to assimilate to white America. And so the blacker you are, there's colorism, the less white you are. The more darker you are, the less closer to whiteness you are. And so from that ideology, I definitely experienced the whole la negra, like don't interact with her because she is darker. You want like la raza, like mejora la raza, like you want to make the lighter you are, the better you are. The better the white people will view you as. So in terms of my experience with the racism, I would say that it definitely affected me within my own family. There's not many. I think I'm amongst my sisters. Well, I know amongst my sisters, I'm the only Afro Latinx because we do have different fathers. So even within my mother and my sisters who are white Latinx, there was always that kind of joke about me being like the darker sibling or me being the black sibling. There was always this ongoing joke about me kind of being like it was not saying that they didn't accept me, but it was always just like, and this is my black sister. So it's just kind of like, why is it that black and brown people both face oppression, but it's like black people can't win in any aspect of it because there's always going to be that racism in every community. And that's not just Latinx; it's like Asian. That it's in every community. So I do feel like there's different like perspectives you can have on racism that isn't just black and white. So all in all, it does stem from like whiteness being the top priority in this society, but there are different perspectives that I had. Yeah.
Well, sorry, I kind of wanted to kind of touch on the thing you were saying about like the dark, like colorism and things like that. I think, and about fetishizing, is it fetishizing like black women? I remember in high school, my favorite thing that I got was, oh, I don't really think black people are attractive, but you're really pretty. Or I don't date black girls, but I date you. Or, something like that. Or, I hated my skin and my hair and my body. And then I hit high school, and next thing I know, everyone wants a fat ass, and everyone wants lip fillers, and everyone wants a light skin and all this bullshit. And I'm like, you guys terrorized me for years because of these things, and now you want to look like me? Are you fucking kidding me?
The thing is, they want it, but they don't want it on a black woman.
Yeah.
They want it in a way that's,
Yeah, and it just it was just like such. It was just I went from feeling like demonized to fetishized, if that makes any sense, like so fast. And it was just like, it was because I was still coming to terms with the fact that I hated, myself. And then next thing I know, I'm having to come to terms with the fact that everyone's sexualizing my body, or, sexualizing the way that I look, or obsessing over my skin, and all this crazy stuff. And yeah, I was also the darkest person in my family. So I was always like, oh, this is my daughter that looks black, like, so it's just weird because it's like that within the home, like subtle racism too is what hurts, I think, the most, just because it was like you're not even really accepted like in your place, like that's your place, and they're not really accepting you. So
I got something to piggyback on that. I'm gonna give it to you. That whole what you guys are talking about is so deep that it's ridiculous, and a lot of people don't see it, and that also it stems from a lot of people not even being with the movement, or like being as involved as you would say we are, because in their mind it's just their whole life. You have people even in your household that have made you feel a certain way about how you look all your life, and those people don't even. The thing is, it's so corrupt that those people aren't even the people that are being protected by that mindset. They're protecting the people at the top with that bullshit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're not even
and
the
that's
ones
the
benefiting.
bullshit.
Yeah.
They're not even benefiting. They living just like us.
Right.
Some people doing just 9 to 5s their whole life. You know what I mean? Like old as fuck, doing the same job I'm doing. But you know what I mean? Your whole mindset is just
What do you think
keeping people
causes
down. This whole system from the beginning, bro. It's been white supremacy from the beginning.
Right.
It's just been watered down.
You know what I think it is?
Time.
So what I think, a lot of people who don't speak on these issues and aren't as involved feel like they're comfortable.
Very comfortable.
They found a spot and they're comfortable. They don't want it.
mess it
They're
up.
okay.
Right.
They're okay.
The system benefits them.
Exactly. And that's the people we want to address today. So if you come across this video today and you are comfortable where you're at, I challenge you to listen to people in your surroundings. So Dominic is actually somebody that I learned a lot from myself. So she saw me at a protest I was at, and we just happened to, be on social media. And I felt like very passionate about what I'm doing and why I'm out here. But while I'm out here, I felt like I was challenged. So I was at a protest, and I happened to be, in the front, and the people, like my intentions I want to say are pure, you know what I mean? And I'm in this with my whole heart, and I don't do this for myself. I do it for the greater good of not just everybody, but like I see the struggles of the Black community, so I'm out here and I understand that, like, for example, like I can't relate to all of you guys' struggles, you know what I mean? As a, Mexican American, but I see them, I see them to an extent, and I can experience them up to an extent, but that's enough for me to be out here like that. And while I was out there, so I had this experience that was actually very eye-opening. So one of my jobs, so I was out here, was to keep part of the line straight. The people who were running the protest wanted to have a straight line, and some younger gentlemen were, in the line, and they were not there to keep the peace. The energy was just different, and you understand it. You understand that, you know what I mean, that some people have a different reaction to what's going on, and they were out here to, like, just be on something else. Anyway. Exactly. And they gave me, like, just trouble from the start. They didn't, get out of line or anything. But at one point, a woman that was Black passed by, and she was also one of the organizers, and she was like, so one of the guys reached out to her and was like, I'll listen to you, but I won't listen to a Mexican. And it was just like, okay, it challenged me. I'm like, bro, I'll fucking die for you. What the fuck, But it challenged my way of thinking. It just to like, why would he feel that way? And it's like, maybe he has a reason for feeling that way. So something I hope that, people watching get from this is information to challenge their own beliefs, because I feel like there's a lot of just things that we've picked up from growing up in the system that we've grown comfortable in ourselves that cause us to have like, micro racism within our families. So I feel like that's something that's super tough, is like challenging your family, you know what I mean, on when they're wrong. So that's super uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable and it's tough, but it's what we have to do right now. So Myra, did you have something to add to the first question?
Yeah, to chime in, I don't think people actually realize how ingrained oppression and racism is in our government. And if it's ingrained in a system that you're supposed to follow, it's gonna, people are socially gonna act on it. And, there are seriously there are laws that actually oppress people intentionally. That, California is split up in a way to redistrict areas where they avoid minority communities, and those communities don't get funding. Those communities don't get the attention that they need because they are minority communities, and it's intentional. Um, so I would say, as people who are 18 or older, vote. Vote and go to your elected officials in your district, even if you're in a minority community. It's very important that you have to be represented in the area that you are. And I think it's one of the most important things we can do right now with this upcoming election. And I think it's one of the most important things that we have to continue to do, because we can't let this die down. I mean, if we do, then racism is going to continue, and we can't let that happen. So understand your laws, understand that, this is an intentional thing from the government. It's not just a social thing. So if you can change a law, if you can vote, and you actually have a voice in that matter, do it, not only politically, but socially.
Right. And I think it's crazy because I feel like people don't realize exactly what we're fighting. And I do call it a fight because we're fighting. This is not something that is like peaceful. And it's cool to see these peaceful protests. They get, they voice your opinion, but at the end of the day, this is a fight. Our people are dying, you know? And at the end of the day, we're fighting a system. We're fighting a government. It's been around for hundreds of years. The oppression that we as a collective have been, feeling has been going on for hundreds of years. And it's a big fight. It's a big thing we're trying to like change. So it's gonna, it's gonna take some time, but definitely, like you said, we have to be able to put that effort in to create it, because yeah, it might be something huge that the world might not has seen yet, but it's something that is necessary. And if for the people who see the protests and maybe aren't encouraged to go out because they think, so one of the responses I get often is like, we're never gonna get people to not be racist. We're never gonna stop cops from stop killing black people. We're never gonna officials are never gonna not be corrupt. And it's like, yeah, those things might run deep, but you have to try. You have to try. You can't just let it keep happening.
Right. And that's not the point either. Even though they're gonna be there, it doesn't. You know what I mean? Like there's like, just for an example, there's pedophiles out here. There's rapists out here. Does it make it okay? Does it mean that we should just deal with it? No, we don't. And they hide. They make sure to keep it hidden so that no one knows, and that then they would be crucified or whatever. You know what I mean? By everyone. So I feel like racists, or just racism in general, the whole corruption should be held accountable the same way. You know what I mean? It should be looked at just as bad. Or if you say something, a racist slur, it should be like you're on the same level as them. That's where it needs to be for people to stop, being so openly racist.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it's going to take time to get there.
Right. I think it's crazy too that like we're only really like 50, 60 years removed from like the Civil Rights Act. So I feel like that's something that like our, exactly. So our generation might not see it. You know what I mean? Yeah. All right, guys. So we'll go ahead and transition to the next question. So it's been about 3 weeks since George Floyd was killed. About a month since he was killed, and it sparked heavy outrage across the country. San Diego has been heavily involved in that outrage. I'm proud to say that our city spoke out, and we did not stay silent while these injustices across the country took place. So I know that you guys have been out in your own experiences. What have your experiences been like protesting? Like what have your experiences been like out in the streets?
For me personally, it's been crazy energy. Just it's inspirational. You know what I mean? Like even just dealing with all I've dealt with all my life, I never thought I would have a voice or anyone would ever speak up for the things that we go through. Black and brown or anyone dealing with racism in general. But the fact that we were all doing it, and even here in San Diego, I really didn't expect it at all. Especially right before the first protest in downtown, it was a bunch of white people protesting, just being in their house and not golfing and stuff. Just the week before, you know what I mean? So I'm I'm like, there's no way. And then, the first week of protests in downtown, well, it was La Mesa first, but then I went to downtown and man, it was just the energy and everyone being there, and it was just like hundreds of people, man, and just turning into a war zone. It was just like this. It showed me that this is the time.
You know what's crazy?
It's time.
It's dangerous because you could die.
Yeah.
But I love being out there. I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I love being out there because it's
Yeah.
the right thing. I want to be nowhere else, honestly.
Yeah, but I'm glad it's changing though. You know what I mean? Like the first few weeks of protesting, people were so angry and emotional, and the cops and the National Guard people, they didn't know how to really deal with this at that time, so they instead they resorted to force. But now that I feel like everything's more peaceful, it's going on the route it should be going. You know what I mean? It shouldn't be riots and all that happening. That's just gonna pull down the movement. So I'm glad on how it's transitioning now to be more peaceful, more thought out. I feel like there's more organizations coming up,
right.
and people get involved, whether it's signing petitions, donating, just educating yourself. It's just this is what we've been needing, and people have never felt the urge to do it because why would they? You know what I mean? But I'm glad that we're at that. That's just what I've gotten from the. I mean, I did downtown protests, Mira Mesa. You saw me in PB when we were there. It's just we got to keep it going. I mean, it's deeper
right.
than just a protest too.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's almost like a sense of pride, bro, to be out there.
It really is. You know what I mean? To show that we're not afraid and we're here standing up for
Exactly,
something. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
we're not backing down. They've held us down for long enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's that time.
Yeah, no, I feel it. I feel like our generation has to be the one that says no more.
Anybody else?
Being out there is definitely enlightening. Educating myself more, hearing other people's stories of what they've experienced and how privileged I am or how privileged I'm not compared to other people is definitely something that we need to hear. The most important source are people's personal stories of what they've experienced, not what we hear on the news, but actually listening to people and how they've experienced this. And if a community is coming out and saying like this continuously is happening to us, we are continuously experiencing this, then that means everybody has to just listen, educate yourselves, and speak out against what's wrong. And racism at the end of the day is wrong, and definitely being a part of the protest really enlightened me in that aspect. And I'm so happy to continue it even after the civil rights movement, because it's definitely not over and it's a work in progress. But I'm happy to have been born in this moment, to be in this moment and be a part of it.
Only thing, well, not the only thing. A big thing is, why are we hugging cops? Why are we being friends with our oppressors, And I feel like that's a big part of the problem with these protests, is that we don't all have the same end goal. It's like a lot of people are on the same, they're still starting, and I mean, this might be for a lack of education or exposure, but they're still stuck on racism is bad. Okay, we get that. We get racism is bad. I hope you get that racism is bad. But we're also needing to push it to the next level and say, well, where does racism, stem from? Okay, now the next step, how are we going to attack it? And a lot of these peaceful protests, from my experience, tend to be very performative. They tend to be very, look at me, like I'm woke, look at me, I'm supporting, I have black friends, I got to be here for them, which is okay. But, at the end of the day, the more conflicted we are with our ideals, and I'm talking about the people within the protest, the more divisive we get. So I think what needs to happen is to actually have, like, some people have, before protests, they have, like, where they have a speaker and then they talk about, like, okay, why are we protesting, all that. And I think that's really good because it gets everyone on the same page. And if you're not on the same page, then you can get out, So, stop hugging cops. Like, I hate seeing that shit. Like, I don't know. That shit pisses me off.
So I actually got to organize a vigil on May 34th or May 31st for George Floyd. So that came together really, really interestingly. I mean, I think the vigil was completely peaceful, and then after the vigil, the crowd was tear gassed, and so that was kind of an interesting dichotomy between going from like a very much peaceful coming to mourn and kind of come together as a community to acknowledge the victims, and then going from that to some pretty forceful actions by the police. That was really interesting. It's also just been a little bit overwhelming, I think, as just a young person. Just people have been turning to me as like a resource almost, and I don't know what I'm doing, and it's just been a little hard for me to kind of like keep up with everybody asking me, oh, when's the next protest, or what's going on here, or do you know about this one, is this one safe to go, can you help me get resources for this protest, or can you help me plan one, or can you speak here? And it's been amazing. I do feel a little bit like almost like a pawn sometimes, which is weird, especially for like, I know a lot of white people have been organizing protests in San Diego, and then I've been getting a lot of like requests to speak places, which has been amazing. I love speaking. I think it's really, really important, and I think getting out is important, but it just, I don't know, like you were mentioning, sometimes it does feel a bit performative, and I feel like they're just kind of bringing me into their protests as like a little trophy almost, which feels weird, but at the end of the day, I think it's been really, really important work. One thing that is a weird occurrence, I guess, that I was not expecting was I already felt a little bit traumatized by police presence, but I remember after the first protest in La Mesa, after I had been tear gassed for the first time, totally traumatizing experience, that whole thing, and then I pull into a like a taco shop to eat like for the first time that day, and then I pull up in my car just far enough to where I can't see the open sign, but I can see the red and blue lights, and it looked like it was lights behind me, and my stomach just like dropped. Like I was about to like have a panic attack or something, and all it was red and blue light. So that's really weird for me. I think like I've just been hyper aware of police presence. So like if there's an undercover, I see it. If you know what I mean, if there's a plainclothes police officer, I'm gonna notice him.
Yep.
And obviously there's been a lot more of a police presence in San Diego because of the protests. So that's been scary and kind of like a weird like side effect of the protests, just like being even more terrified of the police, which I feel like if police brutality didn't exist, then that wouldn't happen. Like if anything, going out to the protests should have kind of maybe resolved some things with the SDPD, but it just heightened things. So they're just, I mean, we can't even stop police brutality at the police brutality protest.
Dude, seriously.
So that's just been hard to come to terms with.
Yeah.
But I think protesting has been the most important thing that I've ever done, without a doubt.
So, question for you. So, the first time I saw you was actually at the vigil, and it was powerful. It was super powerful. We held that moment, 8 minutes, 46 seconds. I tried to hold my arm up. So this is how long the cop who was on George Floyd was on his neck for. 8 minutes, 46 seconds. It's a long time. So that's where I saw you from. And when I heard you speak, like I already had something like this in mind. I knew that we had to have like, you were the voice for something. You know, I didn't know you were this young, but like you're brave for being that like open and being a leader like that. So my question to you is, are you scared to be a leader like that, to have people know your face like that, to people hold you to like a certain pedestal like that? Because I face my own moments where it's like, if I do the right thing, I'm gonna put my life in danger.
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think especially after being interviewed by like CBS or some rant, I don't know, but a ton of people were like sending me like their TVs, like there you are on the news. So I was like, okay, so they know me, like they know me.
They know.
And like my Instagram is public because I was posting updates about the vigil and stuff like that. So I knew they had access to everything. So yeah, I mean, I think in terms of like them like finding, like I've had this like weird paranoia, definitely ever since the protests have started, just that like they're gonna get me or that like somebody's listening. Just like because a lot of the protesting, like the planning for it has been happening over the phone, just because of like concern about COVID and stuff. And like I don't know, I just always feel like maybe like I'm being listened to
Right.
or things like that. So like in terms of that, it's been like kind of like this weird psychological game where I'm like, am I like freaking myself out, or is this like an actual concern I should have? Because I mean, I've been hearing about how like the crazy tactics police are using to identify people in viral photos, like protesters in viral photos. So yeah, I definitely feel like I'm taking a risk to do this, but I think right the day before the La Mesa protest, I had this breakdown, and the end result of it was just like kind of all of my fear, like not leaving my body, but just my fear was invalidated by the struggle, if that makes any sense. And I realized that my fear cannot be what controls me right now.
Right.
Right.
And
Right.
So I just realized that this is bigger than I realized it was bigger than my own safety, and that's something my mom didn't want to hear.
Right.
For
No.
sure.
No. 100%.
But I told her like, I said, I'm sorry, Mom. Like I am willing to die for this. And I think that's hard for anyone to hear their child say, but I mean, it's the truth for me. So.
Yeah. No, I had the same struggle. I had to tell my mom and dad, like, this is what I'm passionate about. I feel like I found a big piece of myself within these protests. So it's funny you mentioned that vigil was peaceful, but right before that, we were getting tear gas and shot at.
Yeah.
So we got tear gas shot at in downtown. And it got to the point where the police were like, all right, now you guys are like, they'll give their warnings off, right? And they had just given their final warning, like, you guys cannot be here. You're going to start getting arrested. And it was like, okay, well, luckily there was something else organized around the corner, so we could go walk that way. Otherwise, it was going to be an even bigger confrontation. But no, there's definitely like, unfortunately, right? Because what we're really doing, is it illegal? No. Is protesting illegal? No. No. So my bad. I don't mean to cut you off, but it's just like like at the base of it, it's what we're doing illegal. No, like you speaking out, is it illegal? Like, is it illegal? Is it wrong? No, it's the right thing to do, right? We're speaking out against inequality, against injustices, against things that are not being met. Like the requirements of the people are not being met, and they're the people who are supposed to be enforcing and protecting us. So why do we feel danger? Why do we feel danger doing the right thing?
So that's a good question. It's like, why do we feel danger? It's because there's actually been examples of police, or they won't say it's the police, but for example, like the Ferguson, a lot of the activists that were involved with the Ferguson protest have been killed or turned up dead. Mysteriously.
No suspects.
Yeah, exactly. So you're right to be afraid. We have a right to be afraid because things like that do happen and they sweep it under the rug, or they call it suicide, or they call it just casualties. So I feel like if you're gonna go out and protest, have that in mind that you're not really protected. You're only protected by your community or the people who are also involved in the protest. And I would say cover up, and if you don't want to be exposed or found out, make sure that you're covering up and staying very vigilant of your surroundings, because they are really trying to hurt you, and just be smart about it.
I feel like also it shouldn't be used as like an intimidation factor to stop us from protesting. Just think about it. How many people are like, damn, something might happen to me, I'm gonna not go out there.
Yeah.
That's something that's definitely real for us.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Trey.
That's definitely holding a lot of people back from going to protest, just that fear. But I mean, crowd control is a real thing. So I mean, at some point they do have to enforce that, and by law, it's okay. They have that right, but that doesn't justify everything else that comes with it, tear gas and shooting innocent children, this and that. You know what I mean? And they try to use that to justify it, and people look at it as like, no, that's crowd control. But at a certain point, it's like, when are you going overboard? When are you using military force on innocent civilians? Right. You know what I mean? And then I had something to like piggyback off of what you were saying about. Well, actually, no, you were saying. No, you did say how people come to you and they ask you, oh, what do I do for this or this protest or where? How do you honestly feel about that? Do you feel like in a way, they should be educating themselves and they shouldn't be using you as their source of information? Or do you see it as just like, it's okay, I'm doing whatever I can to help? Or do you feel like, you know what I mean? I'm kind of conflicted about that sometimes because I have certain friends who I know better, and that they have the same. You're looking at the same
sources.
information I'm looking at, the same
Right,
resources.
right.
You know what I mean? I'm not no full-fledged politician or anything. You know what I mean? So it's like, at a certain point, is it them being like trying to take the easy way, or like even I don't know, just not taking it as serious? I feel sometimes. I don't know. I'm conflicted on it. So I want to know your opinion.
I think what I realized quickly was, I guess what I realized when I was 5 is that a lot of these people are they're looking to me for this specific thing, if that makes any sense. And they're associating me with this specific thing. So I mean, it almost feels like an obligation to fill that role, to be honest. So it is like overwhelming and stressful just because it's not necessarily something I don't want to spend an hour responding to 20 DMs from random people asking me about when the next protest is, asking me for accurate information, asking me if the police are going to be there.
Right.
How am I supposed to know that, you know?
Yeah,
So it's just, but it's also something that I do feel obligated to do just because, like, I realized that because of the way that the vigil happened and me being interviewed by the news, people are looking at me in a way, and having that platform, like now that people are kind of paying attention, I'm like, okay, you know what I mean? Like it is an obligation for me to give these people information just because I have that platform now. So I feel like if I was just a regular protest, like run of the protester that's going out a lot, I wouldn't feel that obligation. But just because I did host the vigil, and kind of have a little bit of like local recognition for that. I think that's kind of why I feel it's like I'm not super offended or anything by people reaching out, because I know that a lot of the people, they're doing it out of their bet, or there's no harm. They have no negative intention by reaching out. Like, they truly just want to know, they want to help, they want to act, and so I respect that. So I try and respect, and do my best, but. Yeah, I mean, there's a line, there's a line where it's like there's only so much I can do as one person, and Google exists, so, if you want to educate yourself, feel free to do that.
Exactly.
But in terms of, like, information about protests and stuff, I realize that especially now, because I'm in a few groups, like, just, where, like, accurate information, or we try and gather resources for certain protests or things like that. So I do have access to like a little bit more reliable information about some of the local protests compared to some people. So I do feel like I do have to step up and use that, to my advantage and to other people's advantage, and help everyone stay like informed and stuff on what's going on. But yeah, it is like, it's just a weird burden that I didn't expect to have, to be honest. I mean, like 3 weeks ago I was like, doing nothing, just hanging out. And now I'm very much not doing nothing and not hanging out. So, yeah.
Crazy. All right. So not to change the topic, before we move a little bit more forward, Myra, I actually had a question for you, a couple questions for you. So just to clarify, you're a little bit more familiar with law than, myself. I don't want to speak for you guys, but definitely myself. I want to say, like, my understanding of the laws is what I was taught at in school, and I do not feel confident in what I was taught. So while I'm out in these protests, I don't know exactly what I'm allowed to do, what I'm not allowed to do. I don't feel protected. I don't feel like, like if you just go off of, we're supposed to be able to go protest, I don't feel like we're being given that right. Can you go a little deeper into what exactly we're allowed to do when we're out here? Like, what are, like, I guess, I know it's a broad and vague, conversation to have, but, can you summarize kind of like what are we allowed to go do when we're outside, and you know what I mean?
Gotcha. So, I mean, everybody probably, I hope, understands their First Amendment right, and it's their right to protest for free speech. Everybody is guaranteed that right. Surprisingly, officials and police officers can limit your speech. If you are in some way threatening a police officer with, I don't know, a written sign or something that's not allowed, a police officer can take that as a threat, a harassment in some way or form, and arrest you in that form. if in case you are arrested because a police officer just, wants to use their power and arresting you and, kind of to intimidate you, what I would do is I would just remain silent. I know it's hard to say to stay calm in a already tense situation, but just follow directions. Ask if you are free to leave. If the officer says yes, then you are free to leave and just walk away. If not, if in that case you are then arrested, they do not have the right to search your property without a warrant. Make sure that you always have a warrant. If you do explicitly allow them to search your backpack, your belongings, or whatever, then that could affect you in court later if they find, a knife on you or whatever you have in your possession. They do have the right to do a pat down, just to make sure that you don't have any weapons on you. Once you are taken down, you have the right to call an attorney or a friend. If you do call an attorney, police officers are not allowed to listen into that phone call. Just an FYI. And yeah, if you feel that your rights were violated in some way, if this was an unjustified arrest, if this was in any way kind of just to intimidate you and you felt uncomfortable in any way, that you can take down their name, take down their badge number, report them to their internal affairs division. I think that would be the best way to hold them accountable. The more reports I feel that they would get, the more that they would realize that there's something internally wrong in their system.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you see, so that's like some stuff you pick up growing up, yeah, but you're not all the way clear on the specifics of it until you go through it. Like, I haven't been arrested, so I don't know exactly what the process is like.
Also,
yeah.
remain silent. Do not say anything.
Honestly,
yeah.
All right.
What?
So I heard Siri. Now Siri now has a command where you can you can exactly
really?
records everything and keep a lock on your phone.
Yes.
Keep a lock on your phone.
Yes.
Are they allowed to go through
No,
your phone?
officers are actually not allowed to go through your personal property without a warrant. They're not allowed to look at any of your photos. If they ask to see any photos, videos, or anything on your phone, you are allowed to say no. That is your personal property. Yeah, and they're not allowed to delete any information on your phone, touch your phone, or anything without a warrant. And obviously, it's going to take a long time for them to get a warrant from a judge, so they're probably not even going to go through the process. As long as officers approach people with the intention of them assuming that they don't know their rights. So it's important that you do. So once you're confronted with that, you know exactly the process that they take, and then they kind of back off in knowing that, you're informed. You know exactly the position that you're in. So.
Thank you. That's important. I feel like we're definitely that's another fault in the system. We're miseducated, undereducated, whatever you want to call it.
That's crazy. Like, we have to be educated on how to be safe around police who are supposed to keep us safe. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of funny how we're supposed to know. Like, it's very important, and I appreciate that you're sharing this information, but it just makes me so angry to think that we have to know all this stuff, and we're just living our life, Like, we're just literally trying to exist, and we're like, oh, you got to know how to interact with cops so they don't kill you. Like, that shit makes me so freaking mad. I'm sorry. Let someone take this away from me.
Actually, I mean, something, I don't know why, you talking about this just reminded me, but my high school, last year we got a police officer. And like you were saying, the fact how it's ironic that we have to learn how to keep ourselves safe against people who are supposed to protect and serve us. I think it's so embarrassing and just ignorant for schools to put police officers on campus with where minorities are on campus and then just pretend, you know what I mean? Like, we all know that the police force is systematically racist. So how can you put a policeman on our campus and expect kids to act, you know what I mean, to especially minority children to see that as a safe, a safe person. Like, any minority child knows not to trust the police. You know what I mean? Like, that's something your parents teach you. So it's just really ironic that they put a policeman on our campus to keep us safe, whatever, when the track record for police officers against minorities is horrible. Like, for me, at least, I was terrified to walk through the quad this whole year because there was a policeman with his hand on his gun in the middle of the quad, staring down brown kids. You know what I mean? It's like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And it's like, How can we just all blatantly ignore, the injustice within the police system, and then we just, we deploy them to houses with domestic abuse and all these things and all these, it's like they aren't helping. It is so blatantly obvious that they are not helping. And then we just keep plastering them on places where it's just they don't fit. They don't fit.
And to chime in on, I feel like police right now just have so many jobs in their description. They have to address mental health without even knowing anything about mental health. They have to
Right.
address, children and minority communities without even knowing, their background or where they come from, or they have to do all these things, and there's no training or like they don't address any issues in depth. So when they're approached in these situations in a school with their hand on their gun, like, how do you think training would have helped them to understand, like, hey, maybe I don't flash my gun in front of all these like children, like, how is that going to make them feel? And I think that is a deep problem in our police force, that they're not really trained to address psychological, emotional, domestic issues that happen within the family. If those are put to professionals, and professionals kind of expect police to do it
Right.
on the
Right, so
job,
that's-
on the
that's a fault.
situation. And it's kind of this cycle that we keep going through.
So that actually leads me to the next question. So it's, how will defunding the police be a viable solution to police brutality, mass incarceration, and all the other issues that come with overfunding the police? So like you were saying, they are expected to cover a lot of areas of work, but they're not trained to do all those types of work. So we've already seen a little bit of legislative change going on, like in San Francisco and Los Angeles. So they have units that are not armed, who are going to respond to like mental cases or mental health issues. You know what I mean? Like, let's say somebody calls and it's like someone is having a mental breakdown. It's going to be a cop who shows up and doesn't know how to treat the certain person and ends up killing them. So it's going to be like somebody that's unarmed in this specific to that situation. So that's actually one of the more common and honestly obvious things we could do right now to start fixing this problem that we have, with the police force. So in your guys' opinion, how will, relocating some of that funding help our communities and start helping solve this problem? Because at one point, it's like, yes, we acknowledge it. It is real. How do we fix it? Like, what do you guys think about that?
I think training. Giving police academy is, I don't know how long, like less than
8 months, yeah.
8 months,
Yeah,
less
yeah.
than a year, and and
You
we
catch this thing.
definitely and it shows that they're not equipped to handle all this variety of situations that they're probably not even exposed to themselves in some way. Police are kind of trained to patrol minority areas, and that's all they're looking at, that's all they see. And they're only exposed to one kind of perspective. So when you're putting them in different perspectives in different situations, they're going to react the same way in every single situation, which is controlling the situation in probably a violent way, because that's all they know how to do. And you train them into understanding people, understanding their background, understanding maybe this person has a mental health issue, maybe this person might be on some kind of drug but is not a violent person, they're just in some kind of mental capacity. So I think training is a very important thing, and also funding minority communities, because like I said earlier, districts are intentionally cut off to where they don't fund these minority communities. And I feel like it starts with education, educating children all the way up, so they build skills, so they have equal opportunity for jobs, so they don't go into the cycle where they see their parents hustling, or they're constantly in the cycle, and then they go into prison, and then they come out of prison without any skills, and what do they go back to? The same thing that they were doing before, and then they're back in prison, and it's this whole cycle. So I think funding in prison reform, education, and helping these communities in building equal opportunity, and I mean equal opportunity, not just affirmative action kind of opportunity, is really going to be essential to bettering this racial inequality.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we were talking about that earlier about investing in prison reform and just our communities. Like we were talking about earlier, Old Chula Vista. You know, we're Chula Vista natives, and you go to one part of Chula Vista, and you got all these, new homes being built, new construction, new hotels, all these different businesses, and then you go to one side of Chula Vista, and they want to keep it the same way, leave it old. I mean, cracks all over the road, sidewalks, barely there. You know, what I mean, just roads, just everything messed up, and
You
it's
can
like
tell the difference.
you can tell the difference, 100%. It's just you can tell that they're just they don't care about it anymore. At least that's how it seems. You know, you go to our the marina on J Street. How beautiful is that area, and the community around that area is beautiful too. Just going there and seeing everyone from different cultures, just on their walks, just with families, just and that area could be so much nicer. That whole bay could be so much nicer, but instead they don't invest anything into it. So it is what it is. And so that comes from all this funding towards the police and other things. It just needs to be reallocated to other, even just our homeless. Just it's so many other things that money could go to instead of just the police for people who are barely trained to do anything and make situations worse. So it's just yeah.
Well, think about it.
something.
Like, look at the gear they have out while they protest. Like, I mean, to like face these protests, it's intimidating. Like, you see the SWAT cars, you know what I mean? And it's like, what, really? Like, we're the people you're supposed to be protecting. You're gonna hit me with that, you know what I mean? So I definitely feel like they're overpowered as like a force. There's no need for that. If we were to allocate that money into other resources, kids, if you started early, you have like centers to learn music, centers to do sports. You know what I mean? Bigger libraries. Why are teachers paying for their own? Why are teachers paying for their own supplies? Why are classrooms so big? Why are textbooks, you know what I mean, so old? Like, I went to Chula Vista High School. It's one of the oldest high schools in San Diego, man. And man, I could tell some of those books are from the 70s, bro. Yeah. Like, it's why? Why are these things like this, and the police budget's accounting for a third of our, public spending? It makes no sense to me, honestly. It's illogical. If you really want your society to prosper, you have to move this money around to other areas. And it's funny because I heard somebody like have a comparison, and it's like, what would it look like if we defunded the police? And somebody was just like, it would look like a rich neighborhood.
That's why, because they don't target the neighborhoods they live in. You hear me? Like, they don't target the neighborhoods they live in. They target neighborhoods that they fear, or like that they feel is lesser than. Yeah, exactly. So I feel like funding wise, they're over militarized. First of all, they don't need all those weapons. That's a lot of fucking money. And their cars, their new cars, like they don't need all that. If they're here to serve us, they're supposed to have our best interests in mind. So what I think that funding should go towards is also, we touch spaces on like education. Why are teachers buying their own supplies, yet the cops can, they have like new weapons and stuff like every day? Why, and then another thing that I've noticed is a big thing how Medi-Cal, I feel like there should be more focus on that in terms of mental health resources, because if a lot of calls that police get are related to mental health issues. So recently, because I do suffer from mental illness myself, and I had to go to a clinic to get some medication, right? The clinic was understaffed. There was a lack of resources there because there just isn't the funding that they need for that population of people that attend those places. So in terms of funding, I think they should fund like mental health resources, and especially because they directly impact the homeless community as well. A lot of people that are on Medi-Cal are homeless as well, and I feel like if they just shifted the focus onto stopping crime and actually treating, the root of the problem, they wouldn't have to put so much money into the police. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no,
Does
100%,
that-
100%,
Yeah.
100%.
I think any young person or people my age know. I mean, I've probably been through like 3 rounds of pink slips. So like watching half our teachers get laid off, hearing about my teachers having to buy supplies or not having supplies, complaining about there not being supplies in the supply room, all these things. My mom is a nurse, has to wear the same mask, it's like for a week, and they don't even have, they don't even have proper PPE at the naval hospital, So it's like, if somebody's upset about defunding the police, well, newsflash, we've been defunding education and healthcare for the last few decades. So I think that's something where a lot of people are kind of afraid of, like, oh, like that's a big thing. But if you look at the numbers, we've been defunding other like public services for years. And I think what's scary to me about the police, like you were talking about the militarization of it, is like that also brings into the military industrial complex, where we spend so much on our military, like, and it is an amount that I can't even fathom, considering how many people in the richest and best country in the world are living under the poverty line, or
Right.
living paycheck to paycheck, or you know what I mean, or being denied healthcare, or can't have access to healthcare. It's like, and then we turn around and spend billions of dollars on a plane when we're not even in war. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I mean, from what I've seen and the research that I've done, it's almost to the point where it's out of control, where the government really has no say on the spending of the police and the spending of the military. They have no way to control that, and I think the people are realizing that. And I think if we just keep demanding, change, like hopefully it'll happen. But I think something that's weird too about crime is that a lot of people see crime as this static part of society. Oh, crime is always going to be a thing. People always steal, people always like kill, whatever, cheat and lie. But it's not. There's always the root cause of something. You know what I mean? Crime isn't something that has. I mean, obviously, like I said, there's always going to be it, but it's not just like a static part of society. There are reasons why people are criminals, and I think a lot of middle America, or just like middle class white people just they just have this idea of criminals. They just, oh, they're bad people. It's just this narrative that you're fed about minorities, first of all, but also just about criminals in general. And that the truth about crime is that a lot of it is because the government is not providing for the people, and then this is the product of it. Right. So I think it's just switching the narrative about what crime even is and about what we can do to solve it. It's not just about policing. It's about solving the underlying reasons why crime is happening in the first place. And I think that's what people don't realize. And that's why defunding the police is so important. It's not about just letting crime run rampant and letting people get away with things. It's about addressing why people feel the need to, do it in the first place.
Attacking the issue at the root.
Yeah, and we're so bad at that. So we need to change. I mean, like it's about time. I really think it's now or never, in a way.
No, I mean, that's definitely the sentiment, and why shouldn't it be? Why would you want to have kids in a society? Why would you want to have kids where they could get killed by police? I mean, think about it. Before, it's crazy because I don't want to get like too broad, you know what I mean? But before this year really happened, my view on society is like, it's getting worse. People are getting more divided. The planet's getting polluted. It's not going to be like what it's supposed to be. It's getting worse every year instead of getting better. But even with COVID and all the bad energy that comes from protests, when you really think about it, it's like now we're moving in a positive direction because now we're creating change, And even though it might not feel good all the time, because I'm telling you, like, sometimes you go to a protest and the energy you come out with is not good, It's like, damn, they're really shooting us. They're really tear gassing us. They really don't like us. I was in Texas for the first week that the protests, happened, and I happened to be in Austin, Texas, and I caught a little glimpse of it, and I got to be in the energy of the cops, and there's real hate. Here in California, it's a lot more peaceful, I mean, comparing it to Texas, right? But there's real hate out there, and it's crazy to acknowledge that people really are still racist, and those people do happen to be in positions of law enforcement and positions of power, exactly. So we definitely got to change that. And I think it definitely starts, with defunding the police, attacking these problems at at the root of the actual problem. I feel like we've been ignoring this issue, and it might be, for several bigger issues. Maybe, the way money is spent, it's like it just gets tossed around that way. Like the police get this, amount of funding. Maybe they are connected to certain officials. And I don't want to start, talking conspiracy now. But like the LA PD, their budget for the year is $3 billion. If you break it down, that's $8 million a day. What are they doing with those $8 million a day? Are they serving their people? Do you feel safe around the cops? No, you know? So it's definitely like one of our root issues, but I'm excited to be addressing it. Honestly, it's about time. And I feel like our generation is definitely gonna be, even if we're not the ones who change the world, we're definitely gonna take a pace, a step forward. Exactly. We're gonna take a step forward, and I feel like if we're strong and we are confident and we're just resilient in what we're doing, eventually, even if we don't see the results of it, our society will one day, be where it needs to be. All right, guys, and our final question is, how can we best support the Black community? What can we do today to start creating that change we all want to see?
I don't have all the answers, but I do have like not a little bit, a big part of it. So I think the biggest thing that allies or non-Black people can do to support the Black community is to listen to your local activists, not just the like the main big ones, because you're really listening to the heart of your community when you're listening to your peers. Not discrediting any like well-known activists, but I think that within your community there's designated problems for each community that you can listen to by people who are in the community. And that also goes to say that there are a lot of LGBT Black folks who are not being heard because they aren't the forefront of the movement in so many heteronormative I guess what I'm saying is to listen to the queer Black people as well, because a lot of times we only listen to the straight Black men or straight Black women. And, I think a lot of people are afraid of looking gay for listening to those people. And yes, some people do think that listening to LGBT speakers makes them gay, which is ridiculous, because essentially the movement is heavily supported by trans Black women. And so, yeah, they started this movement, and without trans Black women, we wouldn't have, a voice or the platform that we have now. So really putting them on a pedestal to speak their truth and to speak their experiences is something that we really need to do, because a lot of times we're only hearing the perspective of straight Black men, which is very important as well, but it's not the whole story. And I think silencing the LGBT community, the Black community, is actually doing more harm than good. So that's just what I have to say about that. Anyone?
I think something that I've kind of been trying to, I've been speaking at a lot of protests, and something that I end up mentioning during every speech is how, as much as this is going to be a physical revolution, it is more so a revolution of the mind. And that an idea is what is going to change things. It's not going to be a viral photo. It's not going to be a viral video. It's going to be the idea. And I think on a foundational level, our thinking is dictated by a capitalist society and a racist society. So I think realizing how those systems affect the way that you even think about the world is really, really, really important. And then trying to kind of dismantle that and separate those systems from your own thinking, and kind of usher in this new era where we don't allow the systems that control us to control our minds as well. And I think that's when true liberation will happen, not just physical liberation, but realizing that it is a liberation of the mind as well, and that I mean, that's kind of where the true freedom will come through, is through the mind. So I think just recognizing, I think just talking to family members, I think, is the most important thing. I think just, bringing it up at the dinner table, things like that. I really think that as uncomfortable as it might be, it's the work that needs to be done, and it's super important, because at the end of the day, I mean, this might be a little bit off topic, but the hard truth is, I mean, for all the white people who are sick of this movement already, or for, you know, the middle-aged people who just want to get back to work, you know, they're annoyed there's people in the street blocking, you know, them getting to where they need to go. This will not end. This will not end. People are awake now. We see the injustice, and we're not going to stop. And I think for people who think it's going to get better, I think they need to realize this is going to be a long, long fight. And I mean, to bring in another issue, I mean, with climate change, we're going to be seeing a lot of issues. I mean, we've already been seeing in insane like hurricanes and things like that, just like displacing people. And in 50 years, I mean, half of this earth is going to be uninhabitable if we don't do something about it. So I think what people need to realize is that this change is inevitable. This is going to happen whether we want it to or not. And the hard truth is that either we change or we perish. And I think that's what people need to realize, is that this is, yeah, it needs to happen for, yeah, it's bigger than even just this movement. I mean, if we talk about, you know, the effects of the pandemic on wealth inequality in the United States, which was already horrible to begin with, the effects the pandemic has had, the effects that climate change has already been having on our world, and then coupled with this, the racial injustice globally. I mean, it's all coming together right now in this generation. I think something really, really is going to happen, and it's going to decide the fate of the human race. And that's a huge thing to say, but it's honestly just the truth. And we're either going to figure out how to create a sustainable, equal world, or we're going to cease to exist. So I think once people see it as an issue that is literally, it's like, it is a life or death issue for every person on the planet, I think hopefully that's when real change will start. But I think it starts with your mind. It starts with your own thoughts.
Okay, so I think the most important thing about, you know, not being from the Black community, but maybe from the brown community, either way, you listen. Listening is the most important thing that anybody can do at this point. You know, I think that this movement is important, and to be a part of it is, you know, everybody should be a part of it. Everybody should kind of join together and say, like, this is a problem that's been happening for years, since the 1800s. Like, when is it going to stop? You know, you see other countries like in Germany in the Holocaust, they acknowledge what happened, you know, during the Holocaust. They acknowledge, they put grave sites where Jews were killed. You know, when are we ever going to acknowledge that we have so many injustices in our history? When are we going to acknowledge oppression? When are we going to actually talk about it and say, hey, this is wrong, not just put it in a history book and just have a kid learn it, you know, in the 4th grade, and that's it. I think it's important to acknowledge oppression because so many people dismiss it. So many people just read it on a history book, say, hey, it happened. It's not happening anymore. But the reality is it does. It does happen in very subtle ways. And I think we need to listen. I think that's very important.
For me, I think it's more so like on a personal level, just like blacks, browns, all minorities in different areas kind of keep themselves down, I feel like, by, you know, like even me personally, like with black people, dark skins, a self-hate that people have been perpetuating for us, you know what I mean? So we'll, instead of using that time to educate ourselves or to build each other up or whatever, or allow that person to have an open mind to want to pursue a certain career, this and that, we talk down on them. We compare our hair. We compare how dark you are. You know what I mean? It's little things like that that need to change before people can feel like they have the right, or like as an option, or like they have like the confidence to pursue something bigger than just the hood, or, you know, drugs, or, you know, doing whatever, just getting money or nice cars, or, you know, just the simple stuff that we've been conditioned to, you know, think and, you know, just dwell on. I feel like that stuff needs to change in the black and brown, just any minority community in America or anywhere. Honestly, it just needs to change before anything else could change too. And just investing in our communities as well. You know what I mean? Giving them the right resources so they don't have to resort to those things. You know what I mean? And stay in that little bubble. You know what I mean? And that goes back to the police. It goes back to our system. All of that. It all needs to change in order for our black communities, all of our communities, to grow. So that's my opinion on it.
I think you guys summed up a lot of ways that we can help now. And they're all great points to start. For me, it's been kind of like, not difficult, but definitely challenging to find my role in this whole movement that's going on. Because right now what's going on is Black Lives Matter, right? That's what's going on right now. It's the movement right now that we're getting behind. But there's a goal that's even bigger than that, and that's not to put it down. That's not to like say, that's not all lives matter. I'm not about to all lives matter this shit. Please do not misinterpret me. But because I do feel like if we are ever to get to that world where we really are all equal and we have a just world, the first step to creating that change is to making Black Lives Matter. Honestly, I feel like that's the first thing that needs to happen. That's the biggest injustice that our country has, and I feel like the world, honestly, has experienced. It's been going on since forever, since what, like the 1400s, something like that. I don't even know because my history book sucked. But but like it's been going on for a long time, and it's the first thing we need to fix, because when you really think about it, like that, once we fix that problem of being separated by color, we then become closer. We are no longer just black people, white people, we're people. And we can start to see some of that division that we experience within each other. And I know we're super close to, the civil rights movement, and there's still generations living in this earth that experience racism and just, having to drink from a black water fountain and a white one, So there's still a lot of those issues that linger in our societies. And unfortunately, a lot of those people who lived in those times are hard-headed. That's how they were taught. They're closed-minded, and they will not be open to change. So unfortunately, how I see it is a lot of those people are just gonna have to die. And this, honestly, is nature. It is nature, and they're gonna have to die out, right? So, so you're gonna have to eventually just die. So we're gonna have to deal with that as it goes on, right? Because you're not gonna change a lot of these minds. So that actually brings me to my real point. I feel like my greatest contribution to this cause right now is being a representative of my community, and that's the Hispanic Latino community. So I want to speak to you, Hispanic Latinos, hermanos, hermanas. We as a community also feel racism. We also feel some form of oppression, but it is not the black experience. So first and foremost, I just want to say, because I know that everybody who's out there protesting, I can't speak for everybody, but I know everybody who's out there protesting, out there with us, we are not racist. We don't hold hate in our heart for you, but we acknowledge that our community is racist toward the black community. Like, I see that, and it bugs me. Honestly, it hurts me, because I see it from people in my family. So my solution to this, that we can start making change happen now, is hold your circle accountable. Hold your family accountable. When people say shit that they're not supposed to say, challenge them. I know that sounds difficult. 2 days ago, I had this conversation with my dad, and it was a very awkward, challenging conversation, because he's not the most open-minded person. And in the Latino community, it's like you respect your elders and you don't question their way of thinking. That's what's gonna happen, and you don't fuck with that. But if we're really gonna be the generation that creates change, we have to start creating that change, and that starts at home. Because I might not be able to change what the president does, but I could, change the way my family acts. I could, you're not gonna say mayate around me, and I don't mean to say that, you know what I mean, like insultingly, but like one of the arguments is like, that's not the N-word. Like, yes, it is. In Spanish, it should be considered the N-word, and we should not allow people to say that shit openly around us, and you should be just as insulted as if somebody were to say the N-word. So my solution is to first challenge yourself, because we live in a system that allows for these things to be funny. You know what I mean? People joke about this shit, and it's not a joking matter anymore. So we first have to challenge our own beliefs. We have to challenge our own racist thoughts and anything that we have. And that's not an easy process. It's not gonna happen from one day to the next. So as you're doing that, also hold your people accountable. Don't allow them to say the racist shit. You know what I mean? And like I was saying earlier, some people are just not gonna change. So just don't associate with them. Don't support them. You know? Let them be. They're gonna do what they're gonna do. But you do have a voice. You do have, like, your time is a resource. Your money is a resource. You know what I mean? Your presence is a resource. So, you know, separate yourself, hold yourself accountable, hold your people accountable, listen, and check your intentions. At the end of the day, are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? You know, it doesn't matter if you support people through Instagram, if you support by donating money, if you're out here protesting, you know, even if you can't do any of those things, if you just support your people and with encouraging words, you know whether you're part of the problem or if you're part of the solution. So at the end of the day, if you really want to see change, start with yourself. You know?
Man, I got one more thing to say on that too, because you're right. I mean, to everybody who listens to this, you can only distract yourself for so long. You can only party and drink and smoke and do whatever else that keeps you, you know, makes you feel good and makes you feel like you're, you know, and you're safe from the world. It can only happen for so long until you realize that you got to stand up and make a choice and pick a side and do something that's right. You know what I mean? It's just, how long is it going to take for you to realize that you have to play a part in this? You can't just sit in the sidelines and think that every day is a good time and it's a turn up or just whatever. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be. It could be anything that you want to focus on, but you have to play a part in making this world a better place for everybody. You know what I mean? Like it just can't stay this way. And I hope that everybody who listens to this really gets that idea and gets that, you know, you can have a voice and it's not, you shouldn't be scared. You shouldn't be afraid to say something or speak up or, you know, have an opinion on something that's right, whether it's right or wrong. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, I hope everybody who listens to this really gets the picture and makes a decision and does something to help their community. You know what I mean? It's not just about black people. It's not about brown people. It's not about Asian people. It's not about Mexicans. It's about just the human race in general. Like, everyone should have equal opportunity. Everyone should be able to go around and just exist and be freely do that without feeling like their life is threatened. And we need to do our best to support that. That's all I got to say on that.
Beautifully said, man. Honestly, if we want to be the change, if we want change, we have to be the change. So, you know, we'll leave it at that because that was powerful. I want to say thank you to guys, you know, for being here. I know, you know, thank you for donating your time. You know what I mean? I know you guys have your own stuff going on, but I appreciate you being a part of the change, and I guarantee you that one day, you know, we're gonna be living in a time where, you know, at least we won't be here, and you know, we're pushing it forward. And like he said, man, to anybody who, you know, wants to see change in the world, starts now, right now. All right.
Let's get it.